Well, we're almost 60 days into the 90-day window for the court to issue its ruling in Tory Lanez appeal, which means that every new day that comes, it gets more and more likely that it'll be decision day and we find out whether or not Tory Lanez has in fact won his appeal. And for those of y'all following this channel for a while, y'all know I've been following the Tory Lanez case since day one, and my official prediction as a criminal attorney is that he's going to win this appeal and get a new trial. And that's mainly because of one major reason, and that's a reason I'm going to break down for you today. So greetings and salutations everybody, my name's Scotty O, aka the Gen Z attorney, and I currently work in private practice as an attorney in North Carolina, doing domestic family law litigation as well as criminal defense. And like I said, I've been following this case for the longest, and we have all been waiting with bated breath to see whether or not Tory's coming home. And so if you want to get all the big brain legal updates on this case, then be sure to drop a like down below to let me know you like the content, and subscribe to come back for more. And of course, I love to see y'all in the comments talking about how you feel about this case. I'll be down in there talking with y'all, so I'd love to see you down there. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. So to understand the appellate argument that I think is the strongest, we have to understand the facts of this case, and particularly the players involved. So just to do a brief recap, I know a lot of us know this already, but this all started back in 2020 when Tory Lanez was messing around sleeping with Megan Thee Stallion and also Meg's best friend Kelsey Harris. The three of them had gone to a house party together at Kylie Jenner's house before leaving together in a car that was driven by Tory Lanez's bodyguard Jaquan Smith. It was inside the car that Tory Lanez revealed that he had been sleeping with both Meg and Kelsey, who were best friends, thus leading to an altercation in the car. Now Meg swears the altercation was between her and Tory, but the facts strongly suggest that it was actually between Meg and Kelsey and actually turned physical because Kelsey was covered in injuries consistent with fighting a female, such as scratch marks, claw marks, hair clumps missing, broken nails, all strongly suggesting that she had been in a fight with Meg, and in fact there was a neighbor who testified saying that he saw two girls fighting. Which, just FYI, just so we all remember, Meg is still denying to this day that her and Kelsey got into a fight that night. But either way, as the fight is happening, a gun gets involved and ends up going off. As Meg tells it, she says Tory had the gun and shot at her and she saw it all happen. But as Tory and Jaquan Smith and the neighbor all tell it, it was actually a female with the gun at first, in this case being Kelsey, and Tory went and actually wrestled the gun away from her. At this point, they all get back in the car, drive away, police find them, get involved, and arrest everybody. At that point, after the gunshots, they all got back in the car and drove away, but then police were able to find them and start investigating and arrested Tory. Obviously, we know what happened at trial. Tory Lanez ended up getting convicted and is now serving a 10-year sentence, of which he's seeking relief on in form of an appeal. And there's plenty of new facts that have come out that would help Tory in a new trial. Things like Jaquan Smith and his testimony about what happened that night. Remember, he was the bodyguard inside the car, as well as Bradley James, who was Kelsey Harris's bodyguard during the trial. Bradley James has put as sworn testimony in an affidavit that he overheard Kelsey admit that she was the one who had the gun and shot it, and she didn't know how to say that without incriminating herself. So there's definitely some new facts that have come out that really help Tory's side of the case, but that's not actually the big argument that I'm relying on for saying that I think this will get remanded on appeal. After reading through the briefs and watching the appeal oral arguments live, to me the single biggest argument that strongly supports a finding of remanding this case for a new trial is the fact that the judge allowed Kelsey Harris's recorded interview to be played in court in front of the jury. Just so we all understand on this, as I just laid out, Kelsey was intimately involved with every core fact within this case because she was there and she witnessed everything. And initially, prosecutors believed she was going to testify in court and corroborate Meg's story because Kelsey came in and sat with prosecutors and sat with the police and gave an interview where she was recorded. And during this interview, she did largely corroborate Meg's story, which is that Tory had the gun and Tory was the one who shot at Meg. It was a 70-something minute interview, so it was a long interview, and it gave prosecutors what they thought was their open-shut, slam-bang silver bullet for the case. And so naturally, prosecutors called Kelsey Harris to testify during the trial, expecting her to largely reflect what she said during the interview and corroborate Meg's story. The only problem was when Kelsey took the stand at trial, she actually openly said that she lied during that recorded interview and she lied to protect herself. And then beyond that, any other questions she was asked about that night, she ended up pleading the Fifth, which means when you plead the Fifth Amendment, you're saying, if I answer this question truthfully, as I'm obligated to do being under oath, I could incriminate myself criminally, so instead I'm going to plead the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and choose not to answer. So yeah, when she's on the stand under oath, under cross-examination, saying that she lied during her recorded interview to protect herself and that she has to plead the Fifth about what happened that night, that sends off a lot of alarm bells about what actually happened that night and whether or not we should believe Meg's story, and especially as it was corroborated by Kelsey. And so this was a curveball that no one expected at trial, and even Tory Lanez's team couldn't do much with it because when they tried to cross-examine her and ask her questions, she once again was pleading the Fifth and not answering. And so in a sane, normal world, Kelsey Harris would basically be treated as a nullified witness. Her testimony means nothing because when you plead the Fifth, it's not supposed to be treated as, oh, you did something guilty. The technical legal interpretation of how you're supposed to take it when someone pleads the Fifth is that that it just doesn't affect anything one way or another. And so for her contribution to the case, Kelsey Harris should be treated as having no contribution. That should have been it right then and there. But the prosecutors couldn't just let go their star witness like that. And so what they made a motion to do was to play the entire recorded interview for the jury as a substitute for Kelsey Harris's testimony. And of course, Tory Lanez's defense team objected to that for reasons I'm about to get into. But the judge overruled their objection and let the video play for the jury. And to me, that is just a completely flagrant constitutional violation and is going to be a sufficient grounds for the appellate court to remand the case for a new trial. I don't think they're going to vacate the conviction entirely. I think when you have a violation like this, the appropriate remedy is going to be remand it, send it back for a new trial, but exclude that course of action. So exclude that video entirely. If Kelsey Harris, you can call her to testify, but if she pleads the fifth again, then there's really not much you can do, but you definitely cannot play that video for the jury. And the reason I'm saying this is because of a constitutional provision called the Confrontation Clause. It's part of the Sixth Amendment, and it's a really important clause for criminal prosecution because it gives a criminal defendant the right to confront their accuser, hence why it's called the Confrontation Clause. So what does confrontation look like? It means you have to know who's actually accusing you, and you have to have an opportunity to actually cross-examine them and call into question their testimony in open court in front of the jury. Because it's real easy to make any story sound good when there's only one side telling their version of events, but when you actually cross-examine them and point out the inconsistencies and logical incoherence, that's a really valuable tool, and cases are won and lost on your ability to cross-examine in a hostile manner opposing witnesses. So the Confrontation Clause is super strong, very important constitutional provision, and to me it was completely violated here because Tory Lanez has a right to confront his accusers. In this case, it'd be Kelsey Harris. She was a witness for the state, therefore she's one of his accusers. And so the first prong of that has been met because, of course, she's not anonymous. He knows who she is. That part was clearly met. But the part of the Confrontation Clause that was not met was the ability to cross-examine. Because Tory Lanez and his team were not present for this interview that Kelsey gave to the prosecutors. If they had been present for that interview and they were able to ask her opposing questions and cross-examine her in that space, combined with swearing her to make her under oath during that interview, then you would not have a Confrontation Clause violation. The fact that you have a pretrial interview, unsworn and not subject to cross-examination, and that was the thrust, that was the basis for Kelsey Harris's entire testimony at the case because she didn't testify in court where she was under oath and where she could be cross-examined, that's really serious, and that's a huge constitutional violation in my opinion. And so I think that's going to be sufficient grounds to overturn this case on appeal. But that does leave one other legal doctrine I do want to touch on briefly, and that is called the harmless error doctrine, which applies to appellate cases. Basically what it says is that even if there was an error that happened in the district court level, the trial court level, the error was so small that it was harmless in the sense that it did not affect the outcome of the case. And that's something that the appellate prosecutors tried to argue here. Well, first off, they really didn't touch the Confrontation Clause question at all, but in large part, they did raise this harmless error doctrine to say that even if the court were to find that these are violations that happened during the trial, none of them were big enough, or even in their totality, they're not big enough to have actually affected the outcome of the case. But I just wholeheartedly reject that because the jury sent out questions when they were back deliberating, asking about Kelsey's recorded interview and even asking to watch it again. Well, obviously they're relying on her testimony as the only other person who testified that was actually there as part of the car because Tory Lanez did not testify and his bodyguard Jaquan Smith did not testify. So it was just Meg and Kelsey and then a neighbor who saw part of it were really the only ones who could testify to the actual fight and the actual shooting. And the jury was really interested in that, which is why they were sending out questions and asking to watch the video again. So to me, that strongly suggests that the jury was relying on this in forming their opinion, and that because they voted guilty, that allowing them to see this video by Kelsey Harris did in fact affect their opinion, and because that was a wrongful showing of that video, that is not a harmless error, that is a harmful error, and it did affect the outcome of the case. And admittedly, yes, there's other reasons that this could be overturned on appeal. There were plenty of reasons that were raised in the brief. I just think the Confrontation Clause one was the strongest because from watching the oral arguments, the state prosecutors, they had no response to the Confrontation Clause at all. And so if I had to pick one argument as to why this case would get remanded for a new trial, it would be the Confrontation Clause. And I think that's actually a really good thing. Obviously, the thing we want most would be to completely vacate the conviction and overturn the case entirely. I just don't think that's going to happen here. But a remand for a new trial, I think, is almost as good as a not guilty because with all the new evidence that's come out between Jaquan Smith and his affidavit and Bradley James and his affidavit, we've got a lot more evidence that supports Tory's side of the case. That, I mean, in the first go around, I already thought there was way more than enough reasonable doubt in the case, but now there's gaping black holes of reasonable doubt that are all throughout this entire case. And so just getting a remand for a new trial, assuming that Tory's trial team is competent and able to defend him semi-competently, then yes, I think this is going to be as good as a not guilty. But let me know what you think. Do you think this appeal is going to get overturned? It's really going to be any day now that we're going to get the news on this, so we're waiting with bated breath and anticipation. But yeah, let me know down below what you think about the case and the appeal. Love to hear what y'all have to say about it. And if you learned something new today, then be sure to let me know by dropping a like down below. And if you like this kind of content generally, subscribe to come back for more. I've got a few different sticks in the fire now between my high-profile celebrity case coverage and my Supreme Court coverage and my broader legal political coverage, but I'm trying to keep all the different camps happy and build one happy community here together. And so yeah, if that's what you like, then like I said, be sure to subscribe to come back for more and be a part of this community. And so yeah, that's all I've got for today's video. I will see you all on the next one.